Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the workshop. Fantastic to have you here. Hope you're doing well. On today's episode, as I struggle and learn and try and take the failures, learn what I can from them, and get better, I want to cast this Karambit. We're going to try. We're going to see how I went wrong yesterday, learn from it, and hopefully do it right today. So here is the piece out of the casting. Number one problem with this, I did not make a funnel, which means that I spilt a whole load of stuff up here at the top, which is unnecessary, and that's just a waste of material. Obviously, it's going to get recycled. Number two problem, as you can see, the bronze did not fill up everywhere, and I couldn't quite work out how this was until now. I just picked it up, and I can see, hang on a second, there clearly was not a large enough channel for the bronze to flow through into the workpiece, because look at that. This isn't even connected to it, which means that that second channel I made as a just-in-case channel is the only way bronze got to it. So clearly what I have learned from this is I need to be very careful and very diligent with how it is that I design and plan and carry out the channel through which the bronze needs to flow through to reach the actual shape. Because I clearly did a terrible job if, once it's poured, that channel is not attached to the actual shape. So what I think happened is as it poured, it went down, and there wasn't enough pressure to squeeze it through that tiny, tiny shape, so it moved slow enough that all this stuff set by the time it finally got squeezed through. And of course, I would imagine with something this thin, that material needs to flow really quickly to be able to reach the thinnest extremities of the piece. Otherwise, it's cooling down too fast, because the thinner it is, the smaller the surface area to volume ratio kind of thing. It's not going to hold its heat very well. This, of course, is very sad, because I spent 2.5, 3 hours almost getting this ready to do, and then I messed it up because I didn't do a big enough channel, which would have taken me an extra 30 seconds to do properly. But, my goodness, let me tell you this, for certain, I am never, ever, ever going to make too small of a channel again. We're going to make a hell of a channel on this one. Now, regarding the tube that we had to allow gas to escape, I actually ended up trying to throw some bronze down it as a just-in-case matter, and you can see again, I'd actually tried to pour some bronze down it, because when I did the pour, I noticed the bronze didn't come up through it, and yeah, again, you can see how poorly I planned out and created the channels for the gas and bronze to flow through, because ultimately it's flowing through like less than an 1/8 inch diameter hole, you know, in terms of the cross section right there. Right. I'm going to scrape off all the really dry and baby powder infused sand, break the sand out of this, scrape the bottom half of the flask, and break the sand out of this one. You try, you fail, you start again. And now I'm going to mix up all the sand, rake it all, and temper it, I believe is the proper term for conditioning it and getting it to the right moisture content and the nice kind of mixed up state for us to be ready to use it again. So I'm going to need some more sand, which means that sadly I have to go to my wet sand. Lots of this sand in here was wet sand. I'm mixing it all together with the dry sand, and I'm going to have to dry it all again to get it to the right moisture content so that we can be able to make our mold properly. Pretty exciting, this whole business of starting from scratch, failing, and just doing the same thing over, tweaking, and trying to get a little closer to success. So I'm going to spread it as thin as possible. Let's get the flame on. Dry it all out. I've conditioned the sand. It's now much drier. I think this is going to work a lot better. And so now is the time that we start again. Now, obviously, the way that I learn this stuff is trial and error. Now, trial and error is all fine and dandy, and it's an exciting way of doing things, but it's not really helpful if you're not learning stuff. And the failure, though exciting and I'm sure very comical to watch, it's actually a little bit comical to experience. The failure has to have a purpose, or at least we have to find use and benefit from the failure for us to be able to smile and laugh about it and hopefully still enjoy our time making things. So on that note, what have I learned so far? Well, first things first, my workpiece needs a lot of talcum powder, nice and evenly spread over the whole thing so it'll easily come out when it needs to. The work surface itself needs some talcum powder too. After watching Press Tube's videos, I got the tip to use a paintbrush to help spread it out evenly, and that helps get that even light spread. I can then set the workpiece down, put my cope or drag the bottom half of the flask down on the ground. The ground doesn't look very flat. Well, the cope or drag isn't very flat. Let me grind that off. There we go, much better. The next thing I've learned is to get the best fidelity, I need to start sieving really, really finely and covering the entire piece, actually thicker than you'd think, with really nicely sieved sand. This way, once it all gets compacted, it tends to fill the nooks and crannies a little bit neater. This happens to be a level in a steamer that I have for steaming vegetables. Top tip, carrots and broccoli. That's a mean combination. Makes for some great cooked vegetables. There we go, that'll probably do. Now, of course, that's very time-consuming, so I'm very pleased to have also learned, once I do that initial layer of very fine fidelity, doodah, hickamaroo, whatchamadoodah, sieved sand, I can just dump a load in straight from the pile, because it doesn't really matter so long as the moisture content is right. Obviously, you saw what happened yesterday. Oh no! Had the wrong moisture content in the back half of the top half of the flask, and it fell out of there. And so now I'll start compacting it. Got a little aluminium rod here. Work all the way around and get it all as tight as possible. So as I keep compacting for about the 20th minute or so of just arm exhausting compacting with this aluminium bar here, what else have I learned? Well, I've learned that your flask does not need to be 6 inches tall. Now, I know when I said I was hoping to have used a 4-inch wide piece. I don't even think I would have needed a 4-inch wide flask. For this size thing, I think I could have got away with like a 3.5-inch wide, or height, however you want to measure it, sandbox. And then that would have meant that this sandbox wouldn't weigh 70 pounds once it was fully filled, and it would mean that I wouldn't have had to use 2 bags of sand and be worried about how much sand I have left. I'm sure there's no need for there to be this much sand for the types of projects that I'm embarking on. That's another thing that I have learnt. Learnt through the cruel mistress that is failure. Oh, I might run out of sand. Another thing I have learnt is that the bottom of the flask is important. That this side of the flask is what supports the mold that we made when we flip it over and start hammering from the inside of the other flask. There we go. So doing this type of shape is difficult because obviously there's all sorts of weird contours to it. Now that means that I need to now cut away the sand that has covered up the top of it so that the top half of the mold, the sand will go halfway onto the workpiece and will still then, once we remove it, be able to remove the workpiece and have a perfect amount of space for it to be filled with the molten metal. I found a little knife and a brush. Pretty helpful for all of this. I'll just scrape away and slowly reveal the workpiece enough that it'll be able to come out. Now what I've also learned, and I actually learned this just now, sand prefers to be cut than it does to be scraped. You'll end up with a better finish. Well, we learn as we go, that's for sure. And so I'm using this little kiridashi that I made, cutting my chamfers, and the top half of the mold is gonna fill these chamfers, and hopefully this will give us good fidelity and allow us to remove this workpiece. I've also learned that a very healthy dose of talcum powder evenly spread across the whole thing is very important, so it all comes apart, and so you don't end up with clumps of sand ripping to it all. Then I repeat the drill on this side here, starting with the nice fine filtered sand. Okay, we got a fine dusting, and now we can start pouring it in a little heavier. I certainly won't have enough sand to fill up the whole thing. Again, like yesterday, I'll go halfway, but I'm gonna make sure I have enough sand left over to make myself a little bit of a pouring funnel so that we can make sure we get all of the molten metal inside it. I'm gonna compact this layer, and then I'm gonna put my sprue in. In we go, and then we go with the second. I got it filled up a little past halfway, and I'm now gonna cut in a funnel instead of building one up because I'm all out of sand. The next thing that I've learnt in this expedition is patience and gentleness. It's very important, especially when it is that we are lifting up the top half of the flask. And now, very gingerly, with every bit of care that I can, I am going to carefully, that wasn't very careful. Pull that off. And it looks like some sand fell out. Oh boy. Yep, need to do the top half again. You can see where this half of the mold ripped out. There is no way that I'm gonna get a clean pour. Oh, no, there's no way I'm gonna get a clean pour. Hopefully, I can salvage this half with a little gentle paintbrush action. We might be able to salvage it. Yeah, I think we'll be fine. I'm gonna refurbish this half. We're gonna start again on this. Okay, 40 minutes later. Now, again, I will gently try and pull this off. Gently does it, gently does it. How's it looking? I can't tell. Okay. Oh boy. It's stuck onto the top side. This could be a problem. It doesn't look very clean. What next? Well, I need to pull the sprue out. Sprue. Gently flip it over. There's one groove. There's another groove. Cut it into this side. Right, I'm gonna light the foundry. Are you kidding? No. Okay, the sand is all stuck to it. So as I try and lift that up, you see that the sand is all sticking. Oh, and the magnet just fell off. Ah, rats. The sand stuck to this. Clearly it wasn't well enough, whatchamawat's-it, baby powdered, maybe. Let's see what I can learn from this. It won't be clean, but I want to learn something. I want to see how well these grooves. I have 3 grooves for the pour, and obviously a much better groove for the release of the gases. I want to see how these work. I want to see if we can at least get the whole shape to fill up, even though it's going to be very ugly because we lost all that sand. Okie dokie. Okay, so I'm going to shut off the foundry now. How did it go? I won't know until I break it apart. What was interesting is that on this particular pour, that molten metal bubbled again. And the last times that it bubbled, I had concluded, thanks to your comments and thanks to thinking about it a little more, that it was because there wasn't enough air or enough space for the gas to escape. Here, there was plenty of space for the gas to escape. It bubbled. Why did it do that? Maybe I didn't design the gas escape tube correctly in the casting. I'm not sure. However, we're gonna let this cool down and we're gonna break this apart once it is. Moment of truth, here we go. What? Yes! Oh my goodness! We cast a thing and it actually worked. Oh my goodness. Oh, I'm so nervous. I was so nervous. Okay, this is an ugly casting, but we got the molten metal to flow and fill the whole thing up. Man, that feels good. After all that failure, after all those moments where it was just on the tip of my tongue and the back of my mind to go, okay, I've had enough of this. I'm not gonna do any more today. After all of those, we finally got it. 120 grit after the initial 60 grit, working on the profiling, the secondary bevel itself, here on the small wheel attachment. Now, a little while earlier, I talked about the things I've learned about casting, but of course, with the process of trying to go through the trial and error of learning to cast, not only have I learned a little bit about casting, I've learned a little more about myself, and I've learned a lot more about failure. And what I can say is this, is constantly making mistakes like that is not fun at all. The mistakes, you know, when you make that mistake, you're hoping that you're going to get the success. What is fun, however, is then learning from that and then doing a little bit better on the next one and a little bit better on the next one, hopefully. Going through the process of just trying to get this Karambit cast out of the bronze has been quite nostalgic, because this trial and error process, really, when I was a kid learning blacksmithing for the first time, making mistakes with no idea what it was that I was doing, I was going through the exact same thing. And that is quite nice to reflect on. And I hope that it's also nice for those of you that are trying a new craft. Maybe you're trying blacksmithing, maybe you're trying casting like me, or welding. The chances are, when you start, you're doing a terrible job, just like I am with the Karambit, and you're stumbling and failing, and it's difficult. But what is exciting to think about is, with enough perseverance, with the decision in your head to not give up until you succeed, you end up with a Karambit-looking shape. Or, a few years on, you know, 11-year-old me, a few years on now that I'm 20, I've got a workshop like this. Thank goodness I didn't have it in my head that I was going to give up and throw that piece of forge work to the ground and not pick it up again. The trick really seems to be, get back in the saddle, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and keep plugging away to get what it is that you want. Eventually, you end up getting pretty close. You learn a lot along the way, and for goodness sake, you're going to smile about it just a few minutes after each failure. And so after all that confronting failure so many times over the last 2 days and the process of trying to learn how to cast things, eventually I have cast something that I am just so thrilled with. I hope that if you are endeavoring on the journey of learning something new and teaching it to yourself, that you've had a little bit of a chuckle at my expense for these failures. I really hope you have, because if you chuckle at me, you're going to find it a little easier to chuckle at yourself. When you stumble across your own failures, the best advice that I can give for it is chuckle on, put one foot in front of the other, keep plugging on until you end up with something. It's going to feel very good when you get out the other side. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure as always to have made this Kiradashi. Please do subscribe if you're new to the channel, and I'm going to see you very soon on the next episode.